Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're all doing great. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing folks from all over the place tuning in. Single dad CEO helps farmer, then finds out she owns much more land and machines than he thoung. The wail of a car horn cut through the heavy night, echoing down the empty boulevard. Logan Carter gripped the steering wheel tighter, his eyes fixed grimly on the road ahead. The battered old Range Rover jolted over potholes, mirroring his own state. Unsteady, exhausted, and desperate. Beside him, Mason, an 8-year-old boy with deep blue eyes, curled up in the passenger seat, clutching a threadbare teddy bear to his chest. The boy had long since fallen asleep, undisturbed by the cold seeping through his thin jacket. A weathered wooden sign appeared in the headlights. "Welcome to Maple Hollow, where hearts find home." Logan let out a dry, hollow laugh. "Let's hope this worn-out heart still has something left," he muttered, his voice hoarse from fatigue. 3 months ago, he was the golden CEO of Caldwell Biomedical, gracing the cover of Forbes, hosting champagne-soaked galas in million-dollar penthouses. Now, he was nothing more than a shadow, a single father with exactly $2,137 to his name, buried in debt, and carrying memories too painful to look back on. The car rolled slowly down Main Street, slumbering under soft golden streetlights. A small bakery, a dusty bookstore, an old gas station. No neon lights. No skyscrapers. Just a sleepy, almost aching sort of peace. Logan's gaze drifted to the distant fields, with a mist curled around the trees. A different world. Maybe, just maybe, a second chance. He pulled up in front of the house he'd rented through a local agent. A small, weathered home with peeling paint, a sagging porch, and warped siding. Logan cut the engine and sat still, staring at the house. His entire life, all the triumphs, the failures, the broken dreams, had somehow led to this silent moment. "Mason," he said softly, nudging his son's shoulder. "We're here, buddy." Mason rubbed his eyes, looking around with sleepy wonder, then broke into a bright, innocent smile. "Our new house, Daddy." Logan nodded, squeezing the boy's small shoulder. New house. New start. Inside, the house was worse than he'd expected. The floors creaked under every step, the walls were stained yellow, and the fireplace sat cold beneath layers of dust. But somehow, Mason only saw possibilities. He darted around, pointing excitedly at every corner. "This can be my homework spot, and that's where Rusty will sleep when we get a dog." Logan chuckled hoarsely, emotion tightening his chest. He hauled a few bags from the car, worn clothes, Mason's favorite books, and a battered toolkit once used to build now outdated medical devices. Dinner that night was a humble meal, instant noodles warmed over an ancient gas stove. Mason ate happily, spinning stories about his imaginary new dog, a golden retriever who would follow him through the fields. Under the dim glow of an old table lamp, Logan watched his son and vowed silently. Mason deserved better. So much better. Midnight. Thunder rumbled low on the horizon, warning of an approaching storm. Logan stood at the window, watching the first drops of rain splatter against the sagging roof. He checked his bank account. $1,478 left after rent and groceries. He clenched the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Tomorrow he had to find work. No matter what. A flood of thoughts battered his mind. How to feed Mason, how to rebuild when the whole world had turned its back on him. A beep broke the silence. A message from an unknown number. "Heard you're a mechanic? Got a tractor that needs urgent fixing. Call me, Clara Whitmore, Reed Farm." Logan stared at the text, his heart pounding. Opportunity? Or just another cruel joke from a universe that had already taken so much? He glanced at Mason, sound asleep, breathing evenly, innocence untouched. And Logan knew he had no right to hesitate. Tomorrow, everything had to change. He gripped the phone tighter, whispering into the darkness like a vow. "For my son, I will fight with everything I have." Outside, the storm began to pound Maple Hollow. But inside Logan Carter, for the first time in what felt like forever, a small fire was stirring to life. A man, a boy, a strange town, and a chance to sow the seeds of hope once more. At the break of dawn, Logan Carter drove his battered old Range Rover down the dusty red road leading into the heart of Maple Hollow. The car rattled violently over potholes, but Logan barely noticed. He was well acquainted with rough rides by now. The storm from the night before had left behind sprawling puddles and snapped branches along the roadside. The sky was still painted in shades of ash gray, as if the whole town was struggling to wake from a restless night. Inside Logan churned a strange mixture of anxiety and hope. Clara Whitmore's message from the night before still echoed in his mind. Fixing a tractor might not have been the glamorous CEO position he once held, but right now, it was the only ticket he had in hand. A few miles outside town, an unexpected sight made Logan slam on the brakes. There, stuck in a muddy road, was an old pickup truck, half its wheels buried in thick muck. The driver's door hung open, and a woman was struggling with a tow strap, her boots slipping against the slick ground. Without thinking, Logan pulled over and stepped out. Misty rain seeped into his thin jacket, but he didn't hesitate. "Need a hand?" he called out, raising his voice over the whistling wind. The woman looked up. A sun-weathered face, sharp features, no longer young, but resilient, self-assured. Her gray eyes flashed cautiousness at first, then softened when she sized him up and saw no threat. "Dead battery," she said simply, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Jumper cable snapped. I called a tow, but they said it'll be over an hour." Logan nodded, quickly glancing over the engine. It took him mere seconds to spot the problem. Oxidized terminals and moisture damage from the storm. "Let me take a shot," he offered. She hesitated a beat, then stepped aside. Logan grabbed a small toolkit from his car, a survival habit honed by necessity, and quickly repaired the cables, drying off the contact points. "Give it a try," he said. She climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. After 2 sluggish cranks, the engine coughed to life, spewing white smoke before settling into a steady rumble. She got out, a rare smile breaking across her face. "Thanks. I owe you one." Logan shook his head, brushing mud from his hands. "Just happened to be passing by." They stood there, the misty rain falling between them, a comfortable silence stretching out. "Clara Whitmore," she said, offering her hand. "Logan Carter," he replied, shaking it firmly. It was a solid handshake, genuine, none of the limp, polite grasp he was used to from the cold, glass towers of his past life. This was a woman who knew the work thought would never heal. That afternoon, Logan threw himself into work. He crawled under tractors, cleaned fuel systems, tightened loose parts. Clara stood nearby, silent but attentive. "These old beasts aren't dead yet," Logan said after a while, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just need some love and elbow grease. Give me a week. I'll have them running like new." Clara nodded, visibly relieved. They shook hands. No paperwork, no contracts. Just trust. "Welcome to Reed Farm, Logan Carter," Clara said, a rare warmth in her voice. Under a crimson evening sky, with the wind whispering through endless fields, Logan Carter, the once broken CEO, felt for the first time in years that he had stepped into the right place. Not just a place to start over, but a place to finally belong. The first few days at Reed Farm passed with a steady rhythm, simple on the surface, but layered with hidden meaning. Logan Carter gradually settled into the new pace of life. In the mornings, he and Mason, along with Scout, had toast and eggs prepared by Logan's own hand. Then, while Mason played outside with Scout under the watchful eye of the friendly farmhands, Logan got to work, dismantling machines, inspecting parts, repairing each system one by one. At first, he thought it was just that, simple work to keep life afloat. But the deeper he dug into the old barns and vast machine sheds, the more Logan realized Reed Farm wasn't an ordinary farm. On the 3rd day, while disassembling an old combine near the southern barn, Logan noticed a large steel door, sealed with a rusted padlock. A flicker of curiosity stirred in him. Not suspicion, just a deep understanding, honed from years in business, that what people hide often reveals their true worth. He glanced around. The farm was quiet in the early sun. Clara was nowhere in sight. After a moment's hesitation, Logan gently tugged at the door. It groaned open just enough for him to slip inside. In the dim, dusty light, Logan held his breath. Inside wasn't the heap of broken farm tools he had expected. It was a treasure trove of cutting-edge agricultural technology, GPS-guided seeders, automated drip irrigation systems, land survey drones, advanced soil moisture analyzers. Every piece branded with top-tier names, worth tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Logan walked slowly through the aisles, his hand trailing absently along the cold metal surfaces. A mix of awe and bewilderment filled his chest. This farm wasn't just a family plot. It was an empire quietly operating beneath a humble exterior. He closed the steel door carefully behind him, his mind spinning with new questions. That evening, in their small rented kitchen, Logan flipped pancakes while sneaking glances at Mason, who was busily sketching at the table. "Dad," Mason suddenly asked, his voice clear and curious. "Does Miss Clara own a lot of land?" Logan smiled, flipping a pancake expertly. "Yeah, looks like she does." "Then, why does she drive that old truck and wear old clothes?" Mason asked, his blue eyes wide with innocent confusion. Logan froze for a heartbeat. Such a simple question, hitting right at the heart of what had been quietly bothering him. After dinner, once Mason was tucked in bed, Logan sat on the front porch, gazing at the sliver of moon hanging low over the fields. He thought back to his own rise and fall. The custom-tailored suits, the gleaming cars, the lavish galas. All of it fleeting like a dream. Now, facing a woman like Clara Whitmore, who held wealth but wore humility, Logan understood. True wealth wasn't about displays. It was about resilience, about safeguarding what mattered most without needing to show it off. The next day, Logan asked Clara for permission to inspect the farm's main technical areas in preparation for a full maintenance plan. She hesitated briefly, then nodded. "Let's go. I guess it's time you saw what you're really working with." They walked across the wide fields, the wind carrying the scents of fresh grass and damp earth. Down shaded dirt roads, Logan saw fields tended with an artisan's precision. Organic herb gardens, corn rotated through regenerative cycles, ancient apple orchards intertwined with modern drip irrigation. Every detail whispered deep agricultural knowledge, and enormous investments few outsiders would ever guess at. At the end of their tour, Clara led him to a small cottage tucked between two lines of maple trees. "This was my father's office," she said quietly, her voice tinged with old sorrow. "If you want, you can use it for your maintenance planning." Logan stepped inside, dusty but packed with life. Technical manuals, land surveys, hand-drawn crop rotation charts. On the old wooden desk sat a faded photograph that caught his eye. An older man with kind, weathered eyes standing beside a much younger Clara, thin, fierce, and clutching a handful of soil like it was treasure. Logan brushed his fingers lightly over the frame, feeling the gravity of the space. Reed Farm wasn't just land. It was blood and memory, a living inheritance carried through generations. Later that afternoon, while Logan was checking the generator in the eastern shed, Clara approached, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Take a break," she said, handing him a cup. They sat together on the barn steps, watching the sun sink into a field of gold. "What do you think of this place?" Clara asked, her voice casual but her eyes sharply attentive. Logan sipped his coffee, choosing his words carefully. "It's beautiful, but lonely." Clara laughed, a short, genuine sound. "You're not wrong," she admitted. "It's both. Beautiful and painfully lonely, but it's home." They sat in silence, the fields humming with the twilight breeze. Finally, Clara spoke again, almost a whisper. "Most people don't get it. They only see acreage, profits, fancy machines. But for me, every inch of this land is memories. Hard work, blood and tears." Logan gripped his mug tighter. He understood all too well what it meant to build something with your heart, and to fear losing it. He realized then that the real treasures buried beneath Reed Farm's rich soil weren't machinery or property. They were trust, loyalty, and the sacred weight of family legacy. That night, as Mason slept soundly, Logan stood by the window of their tiny rental house, gazing at the warm lights glowing from Reed Farm across the fields. He knew now, he hadn't just stumbled into a job. He had walked into a battle for something far greater. It would test his courage, his loyalty, and his battered hope for belonging. But deep down, Logan vowed he would fight for this land and the people who called it home. He would not let Reed Farm fall into the wrong hands. Mornings at Whitmore Farm always began with a familiar warmth. The crowing of roosters slicing through the crisp air, the whisper of wind through the cornfields, and somewhere in the distance, Mason's bright, carefree laughter. Logan leaned against the old tractor he was repairing, watching Mason chase after Rusty, the scruffy little red-brown dog they had rescued from the thicket behind the barn. The one scrawny pup had filled out, his coat gleaming in the sunlight. "Mason," Logan called out, his voice laced with a hint of sternness. "Stay out of the cow shed, buddy." "Okay, Dad," Mason shouted back, laughing as he splashed through muddy patches after Rusty. Logan shook his head with a quiet smile. This place, though it had only been a few weeks, had already seeped into their bones, as if they had belonged here all along. That evening, Clara invited Logan and Mason to dinner at the main house for the first time. Logan wiped his hands on an old rag, heart beating a little faster as he climbed the steps to the whitewashed porch. He hadn't thought a simple dinner invitation could make him this nervous. But with Clara, everything carried a different weight. Inside, the kitchen overflowed with the rich smells of roasting meat, fresh bread, and stewed squash. "Just a simple meal," Clara said, a little shy when she caught Logan's amazed expression. "Simple." Logan grinned, breathing deep. "If they gave out awards for smells, you'd win first place." Clara laughed, a genuine, crinkly-eyed laugh that was more beautiful for its lack of pretense. Mason dove right into conversation at the table, rambling on about Rusty, the little apple tree he was planting out back, and his dream of building a treehouse. Logan and Clara listened, exchanging amused and tender glances. In that simple moment, Logan realized it had been a long, long time since any kitchen had rung with the pure laughter of a child. After dinner, they moved out to the front porch for tea. Dusk fell softly. Fireflies blinked among the wild grasses. Mason stretched out on the porch swing. Rusty curled at his feet, both drifting into sleep on the cool evening breeze. Clara poured more tea for Logan, the steam rising ghost-like into the night air. "You don't talk much about your past," she said quietly. Logan stared into the darkness, stretching out across the fields. "I thought I had everything once," he began, voice rough. "A company, fame, money, and in one night, it all collapsed. Friends disappeared, partners turned away, and I realized the only thing that mattered, the only thing left was Mason, and that maybe I never really lived at all, only existed inside cold glass towers." Clara said nothing, only clutched her cup a little tighter. "What about you?" Logan asked gently, not pushing. She smiled, a fleeting, sad smile. "I was born here," she said. "Grew up among these fields. Then Dad died young. Mom followed not long after. Suddenly it was just me and all this land. And you fought for it ever since," Logan said, tilting his head. Claire nodded, her eyes distant. "Some days," she admitted, "I wondered if I was clinging to something already dead. But then every spring, when the seeds break through the soil, I'm reminded hope never really dies. Not as long as someone still believes in it." Logan looked at her, this woman who was so fierce, so stubbornly brave. And he saw, reflected in Clara, the same scarred heart he carried. Two souls battered by life, still quietly reaching for the light. Later that night, as Logan carried a sleeping Mason to the truck, Clara walked them to the gate. "Thank you for dinner," Logan said, voice thick with gratitude. Clara simply smiled, then gently brushed a strand of sweaty hair from Mason's forehead. "This place," she said, barely louder than a whisper, "will always have room for the two of you." Logan stood frozen for a moment, words lodged in his throat. Finally, he reached out and squeezed her hand, a firm, steady squeeze that said everything he couldn't. In the darkness, their battered old truck rumbled away down the dirt drive, leaving behind a small wooden house glowing with warm light. And a woman still standing there, watching them go, her eyes shining under the moon. Somewhere across the fields, the seeds of a new family were quietly, stubbornly beginning to grow. That morning began more peacefully than usual. The early sunlight spilled across the golden fields, and the dewdrops clinging to the branches sparkled like tiny crystals. Logan checked the fence line, while Clara watered the tender, new rows of vegetables. Nearby, Mason and Rusty played by the small pond, the boys' laughter ringing out across the warm, open space. If there was ever a moment when they believed the storms were finally behind them, it was that morning. But in Maple Hollow, the skies never warned before they turned. By late morning, dark clouds thickened at the horizon. A strange humidity crept into the breeze, heavy, damp, and carrying the scent of churned earth. Clara squinted into the distance. "This isn't good," she murmured. Logan straightened up from the half-finished fence post, recognizing the shift in the air. He had lived through enough countryside storms to know sudden changes in the wind were never a good sign. He jogged over to Clara. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Crooked Creek," she said grimly. "If there's heavy rain upstream, the eastern levee won't hold." And then the heavens unleashed their fury. The rain came down in sheets, hammering the fields mercilessly. The wind howled, bending the young cornstalks and tearing branches from the trees. Logan and Clara dashed for the house, Mason close behind, wide-eyed with fear. "What do we do?" Mason cried, clinging to Logan's hand. Clara glanced at the emergency radio. Static crackled, then a stern voice cut through. "Emergency alert. Crooked Creek levee breach imminent. Mandatory evacuation for East Maple Hollow areas. Repeat, evacuate immediately." Clara's face went pale. "We have to reinforce the levee," she said, all hesitation gone. "If we don't, the flood will wipe out the house and the fields." "I'm coming with you," Logan answered without missing a beat. Clara looked at him for a brief moment, something flickering in her eyes. Then she nodded. "Rusty stays to watch over Mason," she ordered, crouching to hug her son tightly. "I'll be back, baby. I promise." Mason nodded, fear clouding his eyes, but standing tall. Logan gripped his son's shoulder. "Stay inside, no matter what." Outside, the storm raged like a living beast, but inside that small house, another battle waged, between fear and courage. They raced into the downpour. The rain whipped across them like lashes from a furious hand. Clara led Logan toward the eastern levee, a long embankment running along the edge of the fields. From a distance, they could already see where the water had broken through, a furious torrent clawing at the land. "We have to plug the breach," Clara shouted over the roaring wind. They dug furiously with their hands, dragged sandbags from the storage shed, working like machines against the elements. Logan had never felt his blood, his sweat, his very will pour into the earth like this before. Each sandbag dropped was a prayer. Each shovel of dirt was a defiant shout against nature's fury. But the water grew angrier. Suddenly, part of the embankment collapsed, dragging Clara toward the churning flood. She screamed as she slipped. "Clara!" Logan roared. Without thinking, he dove after her. The water was ice cold, the current so strong it nearly knocked him off his feet. But he didn't stop. Through the rain and spray, he saw her, clutching desperately at an exposed tree root, her fingers slipping. "Take my hand," Logan shouted. Clara reached out with the last of her strength. Logan grasped her wrist, anchoring himself against a boulder, hauling her inch by inch from the raging flood. Finally, they collapsed onto the soaked ground, gasping for breath. Clara's face was just inches from Logan's, eyes wide with terror and overwhelming gratitude. Logan wrapped his arms tightly around her, holding her to him as if anchoring both of them to the earth itself. The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time they stumbled back to the house. Soaked, muddy, shivering but alive. Mason burst out the door at the sight of them. "Mom!" he cried, running into Clara's arms. Clara dropped to her knees, hugging her son fiercely, tears blending with the rain still dripping from her hair. Logan stood nearby, feeling his chest tighten. He understood that moment. The precious weight of survival, of home not yet washed away. After making sure Mason was safe, Clara turned to Logan. "Thank you," she whispered. Logan only shook his head, the look in his eyes saying everything. No thanks needed. He would always be there. That night, they huddled by the fireplace, wrapped in old quilts, the crackling fire chasing away the chill left by the storm. Mason fell asleep, curled up against Rusty. Logan and Clara sat side by side, sharing the silence. "Tomorrow," Clara said softly, voice cracking, "we'll check the damage. Fix what we can." Logan stared into the fire. "Tomorrow," he agreed. "But tonight, we rest." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. Amid the bruises, the losses, there were still moments like this. Small, precious seeds of peace, sinking roots deep into soil reborn by the storm. Outside, the last clouds drifted away, revealing a sky scattered with stars. A new chapter awaited them, not written in loneliness anymore, but in two hands held tightly together through storms and clear skies alike. The pale morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, its light soft and tentative after the storm. Logan sat quietly at the table, a cold cup of coffee in front of him. His shirt was still stained with mud, his calloused hands laced together, but in his eyes, a spark of determination was burning bright. Clara stood at the sink, drying a mug in silence. From the porch, the sound of Mason and Rusty laughing carried into the kitchen. Pure, carefree laughter, a rare gift after days of storms. "We're not going to lose," Logan said suddenly, his voice cutting through the heavy quiet. Clara turned, exhausted but managing a faint smile. "And if we don't lose, what do we do?" she asked, half teasing, half serious. "We can't just keep patching fences and plugging holes," Logan said, pushing the mug aside. "We need to change how we fight. Not just defend, but strike back." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Logan leaned forward, his eyes bright. "We turn Whitmore Farm into a community center. Host a farmer's market. Fundraise. Rally support. If all of Maple Hollow stands with us, Victor Langston won't be able to force anything." Clara pondered this, tracing the rim of her mug with a finger. "I've thought about that before," she admitted. "But alone, I wasn't strong enough." "You're not alone anymore," Logan said softly. That afternoon, Logan and Clara began their campaign. They compiled a list of friends, neighbors, and shopkeepers whom Clara had helped over the years. People who still owed the Whitmore family a debt, however small. They drove the old pickup over rutted roads, knocking on doors, making their case. Some nodded immediately. Some were hesitant. But with every conversation, every promise to help, they laid another stone in the foundation of their stand. "My granddaughter learned to ride horses at Whitmore Farm," the grocer said, her eyes warm. "I'll bring 2 big tents and 50 folding chairs." "Clara lent me fertilizer during the drought and never asked for payment," the old baker reminisced. "I'll haul out my oven. Let's make this a feast." Logan saw it. The town, once sagging under the weight of fear and weariness, was beginning to wake up. The next days passed in a whirlwind of chaotic hope. Clara helped Mason and other children paint colorful signs. Logan built a small stage from reclaimed lumber. Beekeepers, vegetable farmers, carpenters, and bakers all trickled in, bringing their goods and their laughter. The air buzzed with hammering, calling, laughing. And at the center of it all, Clara stood, hands dirty, hair tied hastily, face sun-kissed and glowing with something rare. Hope. Logan paused, watching her from across the field. He had never seen anyone look so beautiful. Not the kind of beauty he had once seen at galas or flashing across the covers of business magazines, but a fierce, grounded beauty, born of choosing to stay and fight. The day of the fair arrived sooner than expected. By early morning, cars began streaming into Whitmore Farm. Banners, signs, and balloons colored the open grounds. Mason, wearing a plaid shirt and rubber boots, darted between booths with Rusty trailing behind. Logan stood by an old tractor he had restored, a learning machine, where kids could climb up and crank it to see how farming used to be. Across the field, Clara was directing vendors, her laughter as bright as the sun. Music from a local band floated on the breeze. The sounds of conversation, laughter, and children's chatter wove together into a living symphony. A sound Whitmore Farm hadn't heard in many long years. Then Logan felt it, the disturbance. A sleek black SUV rolled into the fairgrounds, its glossy paint catching the sunlight like a blade. Victor Langston stepped out, his tailored suit out of place among the jeans and work boots of the gathering crowd. All eyes turned. Victor strode forward, still moving like a man who believed money and power could bend any world to his will. He stopped before Clara, that familiar half-smile curling his lips. "You think this little festival will save your land?" he sneered. Logan instinctively stepped between Clara and Victor. "It's not just land," Logan said calmly. "It's a whole community." Victor snorted, glancing disdainfully around. "Enjoy your fun," he said coldly, and turned back toward his car. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then one clap, two, and suddenly, the fairgrounds erupted into a storm of applause. Clara stood there, overwhelmed, her eyes shimmering but dry. Logan squeezed her hand. "They chose you," he whispered. "No," Clara whispered back, voice tight with emotion. "They chose themselves. I just held the door open for their dream." That night, when the fair had ended, they gathered around a bonfire at the center of the farm. Mason, clutching Rusty, slept curled up on Clara's lap. Logan tossed another log onto the flames, the firelight flickering in his steady gaze. "Now," Clara said softly, resting her head against Logan's shoulder. "I believe." "Believe what?" Logan asked, his voice low. Clara lifted her head to look at him, eyes shining under the stars. "That sometimes, to save a place, you don't have to beat the strongest enemy." She smiled, tender and fierce. "You just have to light enough lanterns to drive away the dark." Logan pulled her closer. Under the vast night sky, with the fire crackling and friends nearby, they knew that, no matter how long the road ahead, today they had won the most important battle. Hope. On a cold morning at the end of October, Logan sat in the small cabin at the edge of Whitmore Farm, his eyes fixed tensely on an old, worn leather file. Outside, autumn rain misted over the withered golden fields. Inside the tiny room, only the ticking of the wall clock and the slow turning of pages broke the heavy silence. Beside him, Walter Briggs, former attorney of Maple Hollow, a man who had survived 3 decades of lawsuits and land disputes, pushed his glasses down the bridge of his nose and sighed heavily. "This is forgery," Walter said quietly, tapping a finger on the loan contract Victor Langston had submitted to court the week before. "Mr. Whitmore's signature doesn't match. And the date? 3 days after he was admitted to the hospital." Logan clenched his jaw. "And yet he still had the audacity to present it in court," he growled. Walter smirked. "Men like Langston think they're untouchable. But the law, when brought into enough light, can still tear them down." Logan nodded, his eyes ice cold. "Let's show him that." 3 days later, Clara, Logan, Walter, and nearly half of Maple Hollow's residents gathered at the old town hall, a red brick building sitting at the heart of town. The air inside buzzed with tension. Clara sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze locked ahead. Logan sat beside her, squeezing her hand gently, a silent anchor. When Judge Monroe entered, a man past 60, known for his fairness and unshakable resolve, the courtroom rose in unison. Victor's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, strode forward and addressed the court with practiced confidence. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Langston, purchased the outstanding loan from Whitmore Holdings. According to the valid contract, he is entitled to seize 2,000 acres on the east side." A ripple of murmuring spread through the room. Clara stiffened. Logan squeezed her hand, steadying her. Walter rose, moving deliberately to the center, a thick file tucked under his arm. "Your Honor," Walter began, his gravelly voice steady, "we present evidence that the contract submitted by Mr. Langston is a forgery." He held up a copy of the documents for the judge. "This is Mr. Whitmore's authentic signature, notarized in 2015, before his health declined. Compare it to the one on the loan agreement Mr. Langston provided, and the discrepancies are obvious. Judge Monroe leaned in, examining the papers closely. Walter pressed on. Furthermore, we have hospital records confirming that Mr. Whitmore was admitted 3 days before the so-called signing date, in a coma, incapable of signing anything. A low rumble of whispers swept the room. Victor, sitting across the aisle, turned pale. His lawyer leaned in to whisper urgently, but Victor shook his head, sweat beading on his forehead. Walter finished, his voice thundering in the still courtroom. Finally, we present testimony from the local bank staff confirming that no such loan was ever processed through official channels. He turned toward the judge, voice firm and clear. We respectfully request the court to dismiss Mr. Langston's claim entirely and refer this matter for criminal investigation. A heavy silence fell over the room. Judge Monroe shuffled the papers methodically, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he looked up and struck the gavel firmly. The court finds Mr. Langston's claim invalid. All land rights remain with Clara Whitmore. Additionally, due to evidence of potential document forgery, this matter will be referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation. The gavel echoed off the brick walls like a thunderclap of justice. The courtroom erupted into applause. Clara broke into tears, burying her face against Logan's shoulder, sobbing quietly. Logan held her tightly, his own eyes stinging. It wasn't just victory. It was vindication for all the silent battles they had fought. It was reclaiming trust. As the courtroom emptied, the people of Maple Hollow surrounded Clara and Logan in a flurry of hugs and handshakes. "We did it!" Mason shouted, throwing his arms around his father's leg. Logan scooped him up, hugging him close, laughing through tears. Walter stepped forward and shook Logan's hand firmly. "You saved a piece of this town's soul, Logan Carter." Logan shook his head, a quiet smile breaking through. "Not me," he said. "All of us." That evening, they lit a huge bonfire at Whitmore Farm to celebrate. Mason chased Rusty around the fire, their laughter soaring into the crisp autumn night. Clara sat beside Logan, their fingers intertwined beneath her jacket. The firelight flickered across her face, no longer drawn and weary, but calm, radiant from within. "You know something?" Clara whispered, leaning against Logan's shoulder. "What's that?" he asked. "I used to think I'd have to fight alone forever," she said softly. "But then you and Mason came, and I realized that sometimes family isn't something you're born into. It's who you find in the middle of the storm." Logan squeezed her hand gently, his voice rough with emotion. "Me and Mason too. We finally found home." They sat there, under a sky scattered with stars, listening to the crackling fire and the soft whisper of the wind across the fields, knowing that, from this day forward, no matter what trials came their way, they would never be alone again. Because, in a world that so easily abandoned people, they had chosen to stay, chosen to love, and chosen to fight for what was right. The afternoon sun bathed the sprawling fields of Whitmore Farm in a soft golden light. A gentle breeze stirred the young wheat stalks, just beginning to take root again after the flood, like tiny fingers waving hello to a new season. Logan stood beneath the old oak tree, his hand trembling slightly inside his jacket pocket. He gazed up at the ancient branches, where generations of Whitmores had once stood, laughed, and cried. This place held more than just history. It carried hope, silent promises etched deep into the tree's weathered bark. Mason and Rusty played a game of chase not far off, their laughter ringing across the fields, breathing new life into a land once left too long in silence. Clara approached, her light brown hair fluttering in the breeze, her gaze steady and tender, much like the very land she had fought so hard to protect. In her hands was a basket of fresh-baked apple pies, a small gift for the picnic Logan had conveniently arranged. Logan's throat tightened as she drew near. Everything he thought he had lost, trust, home, family, now stood before him, tangible and real through the scars and brokenness. He inhaled deeply, his fingers tightening around the small, warm object hidden in his pocket. A simple silver ring, set with a single ruby, chosen not for extravagance, but for the warmth and resilience it symbolized. "You look nervous," Clara teased, setting the basket down on the blanket spread across the grass. Logan chuckled quietly, kneeling under the guise of straightening the picnic setup, trying to hide his shaking hands. "Maybe," he said, keeping his voice steady, "because I'm about to do something I've never been more sure of." Clara tilted her head, curiosity lighting her eyes. "Clara Whitmore," Logan said, heart hammering, "I didn't come here just to fix your old tractor, or to help save this farm. I came to find something I thought I'd lost forever." He pulled out the ring, its soft pink glint catching the afternoon light. "And I found it. In you, in Mason, in Rusty, in this place." Clara covered her mouth, tears spilling before the full proposal even left his lips. "I know we've both lost things. We both carry scars that no one can erase. But I believe that if we piece them together, we can build something even more beautiful than before." Logan tightened his grip, summoning every ounce of courage. "Clara, will you build a family with me? A real one, right here on this land?" Clara let out a choked laugh through her tears and lunged forward, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. "Yes, Logan," she whispered, voice cracking with joy. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Cheers erupted from across the field. They looked up to see Mason jumping up and down beside Rusty, waving both arms wildly. "I heard everything," Mason yelled, his face shining with excitement. "Mom Clara, Dad Logan." Logan laughed, tears finally sliding down his cheeks. Family. A simple word, but now it felt more sacred than he had ever known. News of their engagement spread through Maple Hollow like wildfire. It seemed the entire town insisted on being part of the celebration. The grounds of Whitmore Farm were soon strung with golden fairy lights, dotted with wildflower wreaths made by the town's mothers, and lined with long tables draped in red and white checkered cloths. The air was thick with the scents of fresh-baked bread, smoked meats, wildflowers, and pure, unbridled joy. Walter Briggs, now regarding Logan almost like a son, served as the unofficial officiant, leaning on his wooden cane, his gravelly voice booming with excitement. "We gather here," he declared, "not just to celebrate an engagement between two incredible people, but to honor the strength of community and the families we choose with our hearts." Applause thundered across the field. Clara, dressed in a simple cream dress, glowed like the morning sun. Logan, in a plain white shirt, wore a grin so wide it seemed it might never leave his face. Mason stood proudly between them, his small hands gripping theirs tightly. And Rusty, donning a new blue scarf, wagged his tail as if he too understood the importance of the moment. As night fell, the old oak was strung with twinkling lights, casting a soft glow across the farm. Logan and Clara danced slowly under the stars, swaying to the gentle twang of country music playing from an old speaker. They didn't need rhythm or technique, just the heartbeat of two souls who had finally found each other. Mason occasionally barged in, demanding a dance of his own, making them all laugh. Rusty bounded around them, barking happily. Walter, standing off to the side with the other elders, wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. "We witnessed a miracle tonight," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Not the kind bought with money or power, but the kind born from the courage to love again." Later that night, after the guests had gone home, it was just Logan, Clara, Mason, and Rusty sitting together on the porch. They huddled under a warm quilt, gazing up at the endless stars scattered across the night sky. "You know," Logan said quietly, his fingers lacing with Clara's, "this is the first time in my life I don't want to be anywhere else." Clara smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "And me," she whispered, "I found someone who will plant the seeds of the future with me." Mason lay asleep across Clara's lap, Rusty curled up contentedly at their feet. A family, not perfect, not flawless, but whole in their own quiet, resilient way, like the old oak tree where it had all begun. And in that warm darkness, amid the familiar fields of Maple Hollow, a new family took root, a sweet promise that no matter how much the world changed, true love would always find its home. The soft morning sunlight bathed Whitmore Farm in a gentle golden hue, draping every cornfield, garden bed, and weathered rooftop in a warm glow, like a tender whisper from Mother Earth herself. A full year had passed since Clara and Logan stood hand in hand beneath the old oak tree, beginning a new chapter not just for themselves, but for the entire Maple Hollow community. On land once ravaged by flood and despair, new life had risen. Not just wheat, carrots, or pumpkins, but quiet dreams and hopes, sown carefully by human hands. That morning, Logan stood on the porch, cradling a steaming mug of coffee, his eyes following Mason sprinting across the fields with Rusty by his side. The boy's little boots were soaked in mud, and his bright laughter carried across the wide, open land. Beside Logan, Clara held a thick stack of papers, the blueprints for the new agricultural training center they had spent months dreaming into existence. "I think," Clara said softly, "we're truly planting seeds for the future." Logan nodded, a deep peace shining in his eyes, a peace he once believed he would never find again. "Not with stocks," he smiled, "but with our hands and our hearts." The Whitmore Community Agricultural Center officially opened in the spring. On opening day, a line of pickup trucks, bicycles, and even horse-drawn carts snaked their way to the farm. People from Maple Hollow and neighboring towns gathered as if for a grand country fair. Beside the traditional farmers market, where locals sold fresh produce, honey, and handmade crafts, Logan had set up a small workshop where kids could learn to maintain tractors, till the soil, and even repair old farming tools. Mason, now proudly 8 years old, wore a bright blue bandana around his neck, his father's technical assistant, and earnestly taught other kids how to tighten bolts and oil water pumps. Clara ran the educational garden, patiently showing children how to plant seeds, test soil, and grow crops season by season. Rusty, now the beloved mascot of Whitmore Farm, trotted happily among the kids, serving as the friendliest supervisor anyone could hope for. But the journey wasn't all sunshine. That summer, a severe drought struck, threatening the crops across Maple Hollow. The earth cracked, the leaves withered, and worry spread like wildfire through the community. Rather than giving in, Logan and Clara organized workshops to teach water conservation techniques, rainwater harvesting, and organic soil restoration. They didn't just save their own farm. They helped save the surrounding fields as well. One evening, after a long day installing drip irrigation lines, Logan and Clara leaned against the sturdy trunk of the old oak, watching fireflies dance across the dusky fields. Clara rested her head against his shoulder, her sigh blending with the quiet night sounds. "Did you ever think," she whispered, "we could build all this? After everything?" Logan tightened his hand around hers, gazing out at the fragile green shoots pushing through the thirsty soil. "I once thought my life was nothing but ashes," he said quietly. "But you, Mason, this place, proved that if you keep planting, no matter how broken the ground, harvest will come again." Fall brought a sweet surprise. At a school event, Mason gave a presentation titled "My Family and Our Farm," moving the entire audience to tears. In his eager, high-pitched voice, he spoke about his dad fixing old tractors, his mom growing vegetables, and their once lonely dog Rusty, now the hero of every child in Maple Hollow. The simple, heartfelt speech won Mason first place at the county level, and more importantly, it showed Logan and Clara that they had built something solid and lasting for their son, not with wealth, fame, or grand estates, but with love, trust, and the steady perseverance rooted deep in the land they called home. Winter wrapped the farm in a soft layer of snow. Logan, Clara, and Mason, now familiar with the rhythms of changing seasons, gathered by the fireplace, sharing their dreams for the year ahead. "I want us to plant more strawberries," Mason announced, cheeks puffed with marshmallows. "I think I'll start a basic mechanics class for single moms," Logan said with a sly wink at Clara. "And I want to plant rows of sunflowers," Clara added with a smile. "So there will always be sunshine, even on cloudy days." Logan pulled them both into his strong arms. "No matter what we plant," he whispered, "if we sow it with our hearts, it will bloom." 1 year. One full cycle. Enough time for broken pieces to blossom into gardens. Enough time for uncertain hearts to build a home. Enough time for a once-lost little boy to find a place to belong. And enough time for a man who thought he had lost everything to find a reason to stand tall and love again. Beneath the old oak tree, where seasons and dreams grew side by side, Logan, Clara, Mason, and Rusty planted a new harvest. A harvest of hope, of family, and the finest seeds of all, love, patience, and faith. Morning on Whitmore Farm began with the crow of a rooster, the crunch of wagon wheels on gravel, and the faint earthy scent rising from the fields after the night's rain. Logan Carter stood by the newly built fence, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand, his eyes following Mason and Rusty as they gleefully chased a kite across the wide, open fields. The little flag at the end of the string fluttered proudly in the golden dawn, like a quiet greeting from the land itself. Just a year ago, Logan had thought success meant skyscrapers of glass and steel, multi-million-dollar contracts signed under the cold glow of neon lights. Today, before his eyes, success took the shape of a laughing boy being tackled by a scruffy dog, in a peace so pure only the land could offer it. That day, Logan had a special meeting. A reporter from the local paper came to interview them about the Whitmore Community Agricultural Center, now a beacon of rural revival. Clara bustled around the porch, her cheeks pink from the cool morning air, while Logan double-checked the educational garden out back. "There's nothing much to interview," he muttered, straightening the hand-painted learning garden sign Mason and his friends had made. "Maybe not for us," Clara smiled, stepping up to fix his collar. "But for this town, it means everything." When the reporter arrived, they showed her around. The lush vegetable plots, the herb-scented greenhouses, the mechanic workshop where Logan taught kids how to fix old pumps and tractors. By sunset, as golden light spilled over the cornfields, the young reporter asked Logan a simple question. "If you had to define success, how would you describe it?" Logan fell silent for a long moment. He looked at Mason, sprawled in the grass, reading a book with Rusty's head resting on his belly. He saw Clara, sleeves rolled up, tenderly planting a row of sunflowers. He saw Maple Hollow, farmers, craftsmen, children, and old-timers gathering around the little farmer's market, exchanging not just goods but laughter and life. And he smiled. "Success," Logan said slowly, "isn't in financial reports or rising stock prices. It's in my son's laughter as he races a rescued stray dog. It's in the simple dinners filled with stories and jokes. It's in every seed we plant when we know, deep down, that our hands and hearts are doing something that matters." That evening, Logan, Clara, and Mason gathered around the kitchen table. The glow from the fireplace turned the wooden walls golden, wrapping the small kitchen in a warm, timeless light. "Dad," Mason asked casually as he gnawed on a drumstick, "when you were a CO, were you happy?" Logan paused, his fork hovering midair. He looked at Mason, the same boy who once curled silently in a cramped apartment corner, now asking the big questions as naturally as breathing. "No," Logan said, setting his fork down, his voice steady. "I had money. I had fancy cars. A massive office. But," he glanced at Clara and gently took her hand, "I never really felt alive." Mason thought about it, then nodded wisely like a little old man. "But you're alive now." Clara laughed softly, and Logan felt his throat tighten with emotion. Yes. Now he was alive, not chasing after someone else's dreams, but growing real moments, rooted deep in love and earth. Weeks later, Maple Hollow hosted its annual fall festival. Whitmore Farm's booth stood out with towering pumpkins, golden bundles of corn, and crates overflowing with bright red apples. Clara and Logan took turns flipping cornbread on the griddle, while Mason darted around, Rusty chasing after him like an enthusiastic little PR assistant. As night fell, the whole town gathered around a giant bonfire in the village square. Families wrapped themselves in quilts, cradled steaming cups of cocoa, and listened to the local band strum old country songs. Logan sat behind Clara, his arms wrapped around her and Mason. The scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and apple pie wove together into a tapestry of memories. "Dad," Mason whispered, head resting on Logan's shoulder. "Are we going to stay here forever?" Logan tightened his embrace. "We'll stay anywhere our family is," he replied softly. Clara turned, her brown eyes glimmering in the firelight. "And where Mother Earth calls us home," she added, brushing a kiss to Logan's cheek. Later that night, Logan sat alone on the porch steps, gazing up at the sea of stars glittering across the velvet sky. The whole farm lay quiet in a profound peace, the kind that comes only when a man finally learns to listen to the rhythms of the land, the wind, and his own heart. He thought of all the days behind him, the failures, the losses, the nights spent questioning everything. And he thought of tomorrow, Mason growing up on this soil, Clara planting fields of sunflowers, Rusty running free under endless skies. Logan understood now. True success was never a destination. It was the journey itself, where every step, every harvest, every laugh shared with loved ones was the real reward. He cupped a handful of cool, fragrant earth in his palm, breathing it in like a prayer. Logan Carter, once a broken man chasing hollow dreams, now smiled quietly into the night and whispered to the land, "Thank you for teaching me how to begin again, and how to redefine what it means to truly succeed." The warm, golden glow of lanterns strung along the dirt road, leading to Whitmore Farm, mixed with the scent of baked apples and pumpkin pie, creating a perfect autumn afternoon in Maple Hollow. Logan Carter leaned against the newly painted porch railing, a steaming mug of cocoa in his hands, quietly taking in the scene before him. Children chased each other around giant hay bales. Elders chatted animatedly beneath the old oak tree, and townsfolk gathered around tables showcasing local crafts and harvest goods. His heart brimmed with a feeling he had chased all his life, but had only recently learned to name: belonging. But to reach this moment, they had walked a long and often difficult road. Not long ago, Maple Hollow had been a quiet, fearful town, tiptoeing around the looming presence of financial giants like Victor Langston. People had grown used to losing small battles just to keep their fragile peace. Logan, Clara, and their tireless efforts had rekindled something nearly lost in the community: courage. They didn't just save Whitmore Farm. They opened a new chapter, transforming the farm into a community center that anchored Maple Hollow's future in tradition, land, and shared hope. One Sunday afternoon, as the last fall market of the season wound down, Mayor Owen Grant climbed onto a makeshift stage built from old barn planks. He waved everyone closer and spoke into a crackling microphone. "Today, we celebrate more than a bountiful harvest," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Today, we celebrate the return of the Maple Hollow spirit, unity, resilience, and love for this land." He turned his gaze toward Logan, Clara, and Mason standing quietly among the crowd. "These newcomers," he smiled, "have reminded us that family isn't just bloodlines, and a community isn't just fences separating homes. It's the invisible ties that bind hearts together." Applause erupted, warm and thunderous like the wind rustling through newly harvested fields. That evening, in the cozy kitchen filled with the scent of baked pies and old wood, Clara sat by the table, carefully mending Mason's worn jacket. Logan brewed 2 cups of peppermint tea, setting one down in front of her. "I remember the first day we met," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "You stood there, covered in dust and machine oil, not needing saving but refusing to be chased." "Off," Clara chuckled softly, a sound reserved only for Logan. "And you," she replied, stitching another careful seam, "were the only one who didn't just see a broken tractor, but saw a woman trying to piece herself back together." They drank their tea in silence, letting memories and the present weave a quiet, golden tapestry between them. Mason came thundering down the stairs, Rusty bounding behind him. He held up a crumpled piece of paper, beaming with pride. "Dad, Miss Clara," he called out. "I wrote my school essay." The topic is my hero. Logan raised an eyebrow. Clara tilted her head, smiling. Who did you pick? Logan teased. Mason shuffled his feet, cheeks flushing pink. I wrote about you. And Miss Clara. And Rusty too, he mumbled. Because you all taught me heroes don't need capes. They just need hearts big enough to stay when everyone else walks away. For a moment, no one spoke. Logan squeezed Clara's hand under the table, while she quickly wiped away a tear at the corner of her eye. The next morning, a special letter arrived at Whitmore Farm, an official notice from the county commissioner's office. Whitmore Community Agricultural Center was now officially designated as a community heritage site, with long-term funding secured for expanding educational programs and preserving traditional farming. Logan read the letter 3 times, Mason and Rusty whooping and running laps around the porch. I always believed we could do it, Clara whispered, leaning her head against Logan's shoulder. He nodded slowly. Not just us, he corrected, his eyes drifting out toward the golden fields stretching beyond the porch. All of Maple Hollow. One big family. That winter, for the first time in years, Maple Hollow revived its traditional Christmas festival. Sleighs decorated with twinkling lights glided down Main Street. Outdoor concerts filled the frosty air, and a charity market helped farmers who were still struggling. At the town square, beneath a massive Christmas tree sparkling with lights, Logan, Clara, Mason, and the entire town lit the flame of a new season, not just with bulbs and candles, but with the true warmth of hearts rekindled. As church bells rang out into the snowy night, Logan bent down to whisper in Mason's ear. See, son? Family isn't just the ones who share your blood. Family is the ones who never leave, even when life gets hard. Mason grinned and nodded fiercely, his eyes shimmering brighter than the 1,000 stars blanketing the winter sky. The morning mist clung gently to the fields of Whitmore Farm, each blade heavy with shimmering dew under the soft light of dawn. Logan Carter, wrapped in an old knit sweater, stood by the wooden fence, cradling a steaming cup of coffee, his eyes scanning the horizon. Behind him, the new roof of the freshly inaugurated agricultural education center gleamed in the early morning light. 6 months ago, the idea had been nothing more than a scribbled note on a scrap of paper. Now, the open-air classrooms bustled with children's laughter and the steady voice of teachers explaining the life cycle of wheat, the rhythm of the soil. Clara Whitmore stepped outside, a thick wool scarf wrapped snugly around her neck, carrying a small, warm pastry for Logan. Up before the roosters again, she teased gently, her eyes full of affection. Logan shrugged, flashing a lazy grin. Didn't want to miss this moment, he said, reaching for the pastry. There's something about the first morning of fall. It makes everything feel brand new again. Clara stood beside him, both of them silent for a while, simply listening to the bird song and the whispering of the crimson maple leaves stirred by the breeze. Do you think, she asked softly, that we're planting seeds that will change the future of Maple Hollow? Logan turned to her, his gaze deep and steady. Not just Maple Hollow, he whispered, but everywhere these children will go. That morning, bright yellow school buses pulled into the farm, releasing a tide of excited children clutching tiny woven baskets, ready for the from seed to table experience. Mason, now brimming with confidence, proudly wore a junior assistant badge as he led a group into the vegetable gardens. He explained enthusiastically, "These are carrots, and over there are green beans. You have to take care of the soil like you take care of your friends. If you don't water it or pull the weeds, the plants get sad too." Logan felt a tightening in his chest as he watched. All those years he had thought he was merely surviving. Yet somehow, he had been planting something even more precious, a soul that knew how to love and cherish what truly mattered. Inside the greenhouse, Clara was teaching older students how to sow winter seeds. Her hands moved deftly, her smile warm, her eyes alight as she spoke of the miracle of growth. A shy brown-haired boy raised his hand. "Miss Clara, how does a seed know when it's time to come out of the ground?" Clara paused thoughtfully, then replied with gentle certainty. "It doesn't really know. It feels the warmth, the light, the water. And even though it's scared, it still chooses to break through the darkness. A respectful hush settled over the children. The lesson wasn't just for the seeds. Logan watched quietly from the doorway, his heart swelling with emotion. Clara wasn't just teaching farming. She was teaching how to live. That afternoon, after the children had gone, leaving tiny footprints across the soft earth, Logan and Clara sat together on the porch steps. Rusty, now a sturdy, loyal companion, curled up beside Mason, who was engrossed in a colorful farming picture book. Looking back, Clara mused lazily. I don't know how I ever thought I could hold onto this land by myself. Logan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. You don't have to do anything alone anymore, he said firmly. We're in this together. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of a heart she could trust, the kind of heartbeat that spelled home. That Thanksgiving, Whitmore Farm hosted its first ever harvest festival. The townsfolk of Maple Hollow came in droves, carrying baskets of food, homemade gifts, and stories long overdue. One corner of the yard became a makeshift stage where Mason and the other children put on a short play called The Journey of a Seed. Under the twinkling lights, Mason, cheeks flushed with excitement, proudly recited the closing lines. Just like a tiny seed needs trust to break through the soil, we too must believe in good things to grow in this big world. The entire farmyard exploded in cheers and applause. Logan squeezed Clara's hand tightly. Their eyes met, deep and knowing. They understood. They were seeds too. People who dared to believe, to love, and to root themselves into a land full of both challenges and hope. Before the evening ended, Mayor Owen Grant took the stage, microphone in hand. Whitmore Farm, he declared, is no longer just a part of Maple Hollow's history. It is now a beacon for our future, a future built on the most enduring values: faith, love, and sharing. His eyes found Logan, Clara, Mason, and Rusty, a silent, heartfelt thank you. As the crowds slowly dispersed, the only thing left was the crackling of a fire pit in the open yard. Clara leaned against Logan's chest and whispered, "We did it, didn't we?" Logan tightened his arms around her. "Not just for us," he said softly. "For every child, every family, and every dream still taking root." Above them, the stars scattered like tiny seeds of light across the black velvet sky, promising yet another harvest, one sown with trust, nurtured with love, and destined to bloom. The late afternoon sunlight poured golden honey over the lush green rows of Whitmore Farm, cloaking everything in a gentle, amber glow. Logan Carter sat on the worn porch steps, one hand cradling a steaming cup of tea, the other absent-mindedly tracing circles on the old wooden table. Across the yard, Mason chased after Rusty, the boy's pure laughter soaring into the open sky. Clara Whitmore leaned against the doorway, arms folded across her chest, her gaze soft and full of quiet affection as she watched them. "I wonder," Logan began, his voice low and thoughtful, "how many more storms we'll have to weather?" Clara smiled, stepping forward to sit beside him. "No one knows," she answered gently. "But we do know how to plant our roots deeper every time the storms pass." Logan leaned back, tilting his head to the sky awash in hues of sunset. Strangely, after all his years of wandering, loss, and broken dreams, it was here, in this simple, worn corner of the world, that his heart finally found peace. "I used to think I'd have to fight alone forever," Clara whispered, "until you and Mason showed up, like the first winds of spring." Logan turned toward her, finding in her eyes an unspoken promise. No matter how many storms returned, they would face them together. The next day, the sky darkened without warning, heavy clouds roiling like angry waves. The radio crackled urgent warnings of a storm barreling toward Maple Hollow. "We need to get ready," Clara said firmly, her voice steady with purpose. Logan nodded without hesitation. Together, they secured the roof, boarded up windows, herded the chickens into the coop, and moved the cattle to higher ground. Even Mason, still small, rolled up his sleeves and helped, his face determined and serious. "Just like last time, right, Dad?" Mason asked, his eyes bright with trust. Logan ruffled his hair. Exactly, son. We got through it once. We'll do it again. The storm hit at midnight. Winds howled through the trees, and rain battered the roof like 1,000 tiny hammers. The three of them huddled in the living room, warmed by the fire in a ring of candlelight, trying to block out the fury raging outside. Rusty rested his chin on Mason's knee, occasionally lifting his head as thunder rolled across the hills. Clara pulled an old, dusty photo album from the shelf, wiping it clean before opening it. "These are the people who built this place," she said, her voice thick with emotion, pointing to sepia-toned photos of rough hands, weathered faces, and proud smiles standing beside fields of golden corn. "We didn't just inherit land," Clara continued. "We inherited dreams, faith, perseverance." Logan slipped his arm around her shoulders, feeling her steady heartbeat beneath the layers of flannel and wool. "And now," he whispered, "we carry that story forward." Mason looked up at them with a gravity beyond his years. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Logan silently vowed, with every fiber of his being, whatever storms came, he would always be here, protecting the people he loved. When morning broke, the farm stood battered but unbroken. A few down branches, a couple of fences flattened, nothing they couldn't fix. Logan, Clara, and Mason threw themselves into the cleanup alongside their neighbors. Mud caked their clothes and hands, but laughter echoed across the fields. Amidst the toil and tired muscles, something stronger than any brick wall bound them together, a spirit of community. That evening, they gathered at Whitmore Farm, a great bonfire blazing against the cooling sky. Clara roasted cornbread on iron skillets, while Logan brewed warm tea for everyone. Old Mr. Johnson, the town's eldest farmer, sank down beside Logan, clapping a weathered hand on his shoulder. "You know, Carter," he said hoarsely, emotion tightening his voice. "Since your family came here, Maple Hollow's been different. Not because of new buildings, because you brought back something we'd forgotten, hope." Logan sat in stunned silence, feeling those words settle in his heart like a hard-won medal of honor. Before the night ended, Clara pulled Logan aside to the shadow of the ancient oak, still standing strong beneath the star-strewn sky. "I was so afraid for so long," Clara began, her voice trembling, "that if I opened my heart again, I'd lose everything." Logan took her hands in his, squeezing them gently. "I was too," he admitted, "but some things are worth the risk. You, Mason, this land, us." In the hush between their words, amidst the whispering leaves and the silent watch of the stars, they kissed. Not urgently, not desperately, but with a quiet certainty that whatever storms might come, they would stand together. The months that followed weren't always easy. There were failed harvests. There were days when drought cracked the earth, when Mason fought off stubborn fevers, when Rusty limped home after chasing foxes. But unlike the lonely past, this time they fought together. Every morning, Logan rose before dawn, brewed Clara her coffee, and walked the fields. Every day, Clara, wearing her crooked straw hat, patiently taught schoolchildren how to plant seeds. And every evening, they circled the fireplace together, listening to Mason recount his marvelous little adventures, as if the world, despite its bruises, still shimmered with wonder if only you looked with open eyes. One warm summer evening, as fireflies flickered among the gardens, Mason, nestled between Logan and Clara, asked shyly, "Dad, Miss Clara, she'll be my mom forever, right?" Logan and Clara exchanged a glance. No words needed. Just a smile, a look, an unspoken promise. "Yes, son," Logan whispered, drawing Mason and Rusty closer into his arms. "We're family. Always." And so, through every hardship and every change, they came to understand. True love doesn't avoid the storms. It learns how to stand taller and drive its roots deeper with every storm that passes. The morning sun poured honeyed light across the sprawling fields of Whitmore Farm, drenching everything in a soft, golden haze. The scent of ripened wheat, freshly tilled earth, and the whisper of the breeze through the trees evoked a pure sense of life. the kind only those who had lost and fought to rebuild could fully appreciate. Logan stood before the golden sea of wheat, sleeves rolled high, his hair kissed with silver under the sunlight. Beside him, Clara held Mason's hand, a radiant smile lighting up her face. Today marked their first harvest of the season, and the first day of a brand new chapter in their lives. In a small square outside the barn, colorful flags fluttered from makeshift poles. The people of Maple Hollow arrived early, baskets brimming with fruits, loaves of bread, jars of honey, and stories that flowed like streams across green fields. "Did you ever imagine it would be this lively?" Clara asked, wonder flickering in her voice as she watched the growing crowd. Logan just smiled. "I figured. Good seeds eventually bloom." Rusty, donning a red bandana around his neck, scampered around the yard like he owned the event, while Mason chased after him, laughing freely, his eyes sparkling with unfiltered joy. Later, Mayor Dawson, trading his usual suit for a checkered shirt and suspenders, climbed a makeshift wooden platform, signaling for the crowd to quiet. "Today," he boomed, "we're not just celebrating a bountiful harvest. We're celebrating the rebirth of Maple Hollow, thanks to the courage of those who refused to give up even when everything seemed lost." All eyes turned toward Logan, Clara, and Mason. Logan bowed his head slightly, squeezing Clara's hand, sharing the weight and wonder of the moment. "Whitmore Farm," the mayor continued, "is no longer just a symbol of one family. It's a symbol for all of us, for this community, and for a future built with hands, hearts, and hope." The applause erupted, rolling across the fields like a wave. That afternoon, as neighbors harvested crops and set up tents for the evening festival, Logan and Clara led Mason out to the old oak tree, the place where silent promises had once been made beneath a silver moon. The oak still stood, steadfast, sheltering, timeless. Logan knelt down, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Clara Whitmore," he began, his voice catching with emotion, "I lost everything, and then found everything I never even knew I needed. In you and Mason in this place." Clara lifted a trembling hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Will you," Logan continued, opening the box to reveal a simple silver ring, "walk with me through every harvest, every sun, and every storm for the rest of our lives?" Mason clapped his small hands, squealing with excitement. Rusty barked as if to seal the moment. Laughing through her tears, Clara nodded vigorously. "Yes, yes, Logan Carter." He slipped a ring on her finger, their hands clasping together like two rivers finally meeting the sea. That night, under a sky ablaze with stars, the whole town gathered at Whitmore Farm. Long tables overflowed with roasted corn, apple pies, fresh milk, and jars of golden honey. Children played hide-and-seek among towering hay bales. Neighbors swapped stories under strings of glowing lights. Music floated from a small local band, fiddles, guitars, and stomping boots thick with honest dirt. Logan pulled Clara onto the open patch of grass to dance. They didn't move gracefully, but each step, each laugh, each glance between them blurred the world around them until only they existed. Mason, clutching Rusty, ran in circles around them, as if all the light and joy in the world had gathered into his tiny, shining heart. When the night deepened and the music faded, Logan carried a sleeping Mason in his arms, Clara draping a blanket across their shoulders. "We're truly home now," Clara whispered. Logan looked up at the sky, where the Milky Way spilled across the heavens like a river of light. He nodded. "Not a home made of bricks," he said softly, "but one built from courage, loyalty, and love." Clara squeezed his hand gently, Rusty curling up by their feet, warm and steadfast as any hearth. The next morning, as the golden sun caressed the wheat fields, Logan, Clara, Mason, and Rusty stood before a new patch of land at the edge of the farm. Mason held a small bag of seeds in his hand. "This is the Garden of Hope," he announced solemnly. Logan smiled, kneeling to help Mason dig little holes. Clara scattered seeds lovingly, and Rusty danced around them, blessing each furrow with boundless joy. They weren't planting gold or fortune. They planted green beans, carrots, pumpkins, simple, enduring things as steadfast and honest as the life they had chosen. And with each seed, they sowed silent prayers, that no matter how fierce the storms, Mother Earth would always find her way back to life. That no matter how lost they sometimes felt, love would always find its way home. And that from the smallest beginnings, the greatest miracles would quietly, stubbornly bloom. In today's world, where success is so often measured by luxury cars, towering skyscrapers, and numbers on financial reports, the story of Logan, Clara, and Mason reminds us of a deeper truth. True success isn't defined by what we own, but by the connections we build, the land we nurture, and the hearts we touch. Many of us, like Logan, have faced falls that felt impossible to recover from, losing reputations, careers, even faith in ourselves. In those darkest moments, it's easy to believe everything is over. But Logan proved that sometimes losing everything isn't the end. It's an invitation to begin again, this time rooted in deeper, more lasting values. Whitmore Farm in their story is not just a piece of land. It's a symbol of the things we so easily forget amid the rush of modern life. Resilience, loyalty to our roots, and trust in simple goodness. Clara, by refusing to sell the farm to the greedy, reminds us that there are things which can never be measured by money. Ancestral memories, the dreams of children running barefoot across the fields. In a society where technology and convenience often pull us away from nature and from each other, their story gently whispers that what truly strengthens a community isn't lucrative contracts or gleaming skyscrapers, but people who stand together in the storm, just as the townsfolk of Maple Hollow did. Perhaps the most beautiful lesson lies in Mason, a boy once uprooted, living a life of constant change, who finally found a place to put down roots, to grow strong under an open sky. It's the simplest, yet most precious dream every child deserves, a place to belong and a family to love. Today, in a world full of uncertainty, their story reminds us. Don't chase hollow illusions at the cost of losing eternal values. When we sow with love, perseverance, and faith, miraculous harvests will come, not only in the fields but deep within our souls. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more heartfelt stories soon. Until next time, stay kind, stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one.